This is the Blood, Sweat, and Sports Parenting Podcast.
I think you're ready.
What up? I'm your producer, Maddy Rasmussen, alongside your team captains, Mike Smith and Marty Hawes. It's go time.
I think you're ready.
This season, brought to you by Built Bar.
What the heck is the date today? The 29th of April, 2022.
It's big.
It is big. We are here. Welcome to, let's call it the first ever Blood, Sweat, and Sports Parenting Podcast. And we've assembled the troops. I'm Mike Smith. This is Marty Hawes.
Hi, everyone.
You got Maddy Rasmussen. Represents our female perspective, our female athlete, our young mother-to-be. And
honestly, the only reason that this is happening, because these guys don't even know how to close their tabs.
It's actually true. It's actually true. Well, Maddy brings more than technical expertise to the equation, but she is a videographer and a digital marketer and a producer and all those good things. And I just want to take a minute, maybe introduce these guys, tell you a little bit my connection to them. I grew up in California. I played multiple sports as a young kid. I ended up going to BYU on a basketball scholarship. Played there for a year, then I served a mission, then I played 3 more years of basketball at BYU. Maybe I could have played other sports, but basketball was my love. I ended up being a first-round draft pick of the Boston Celtics. I ended up playing 9 years professionally, so 4 of those in the NBA, another 5 in Europe. And then after that, I started a broadcasting career, which was probably the greatest mistake of my life, because at that time, I have the mind to be a coach, and I didn't foresee it at the time. So hindsight is always 20/20, but had I gone into coaching, I just didn't know coaches today would be making $5 and $10 million a year running a college program, or NBA coaches. My first NBA coach was making $225,000, and he was fired 2 years later. So I thought, when I'm done playing, I'm going into broadcasting, because those guys can last forever. And as a result, I have been a broadcaster for the last 25 years and done it at various levels. I actually love what I do. I currently broadcast for the Utah Jazz, and so it's been super fun. I've even done NBA playoff games in Spanish. How about that?
Wow.
That's pretty cool. The guy to my left is Marty Hawes. Marty was Mr. All Everything in the state of Utah around the time of, let's say, the early 80s, 1983, 84, I think would encompass his junior and senior years at Hillcrest High School in Sandy, which is in pretty close to Salt Lake City. And not only center fielder on the state champion baseball team and first team All-State baseball, he's first team All-State wide receiver in football, right? You're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's Mr. Basketball. I don't know that your football team won the state title, but maybe they did. No, okay. Their basketball team made it to the state championship and lost, I think in overtime, to the Brighton Bengals. I don't mean to bring that up.
Still never watched it. My wife went to Brighton. Yeah, that's tough.
Oh, that's right. You did marry a Brighton Bengal.
Yes.
And he's the fastest white guy in the world. Or at least he was back then. He's the state 100-meter champ. So he could have played any of those 4 sports in college. He did choose basketball and Brigham Young. And I think he also ran track at BYU. Also served a mission after high school, right? After your first year. And then he played 4 years in a row at BYU on the basketball team. We coincided for 3 of those years, where I was the ball hog, small forward who shot it a lot, and Marty was the point guard who was able to set me up quite a bit until I graduated, and then he took the reins. I think in his first game post Mike Smith era at BYU, he scored 40, right?
Yeah, no, that's right.
So just like Dean Smith is the only guy to hold Michael Jordan under 20, I think I'm the only guy to hold Marty under 30.
So you're his crutch.
That's the most accurate thing you've said today.
That's true, right? No, all that is true. Marty married Tiffany from Brighton. I forget Tiffany's maiden name. Oh, Tiffany Dilly, that's right. She's tall. She's like 5'10". She still runs every day to this day. She looked like Elle McPherson back in the day if you guys were swimsuit issue fans, the February issue, not that I knew which month it was coming out. They've had 3 children, and not only did Marty I didn't even mention Marty's professional basketball. After college, he played professional for 3 years at least, right?
3 years.
3 years. He's gone into business since, and he's been really successful. And he's also been in the club, the AAU basketball world, and raised his own 3 kids, all 3 of whom have been exceptional. Tyler Haws is the greatest scorer in the history of BYU, probably the greatest scorer in the history of the conference, although they may have switched conferences during his tenure from the WAC to the WCC or the WCAC?
WCC.
The WCC. His next boy, TJ, is still playing, and Tyler went on and played professionally. His next boy, TJ, I think still holds the record for most consecutive starts in BYU history from start to finish, right?
Yeah,
Started
right.
his first game and his last game, which is
133, I think.
133 straight games. Never missed a start. Unbelievable. And he's currently playing, he's played overseas, and he's been playing in the NBA G League this year, I think, which just finished up. And then he's got a daughter, Gabby, who's playing college volleyball. So, in the terms of, and we'll get into this, blood, sweat, and sports parenting, this guy's done it. He's not only lived it, he's done it. He's raised 3 kids. So Marty, to his credit, has not paid a dime of college tuition. That's an unbelievable goal.
Yeah.
How the heck did you do that?
No, it seems like you pay it in different ways. Maybe it's not.
That's true. He probably was up at 5 in the morning training those kids how to play ball. But we'll get into all this. And Marty and I have hundreds of stories from our playing days. And we'll get into a story once when BYU traveled to Hawaii and I convinced Marty to go shirtless on a sailboat when Coach told us to stay out of the sun. And he got fried like a lobster red. And that night at practice, the day before the game against the University of Hawaii, unfortunately for Marty, somebody forgot the, what do you call those things?
Yeah,
The little practice jerseys. What do you call them?
Yeah.
Shells?
I think shells. Yeah, that's a.
Like you put on over your jersey so you can tell who the practice squad is. I think Marty's backup forgot him on purpose.
On purpose.
So we went shirts and skins that night. Marty took off his shirt. And of course, Coach had given us the mandate in Hawaii, don't go in the sun.
The practice was over.
At
We all
that
got
moment,
kicked out and-
Marty took off his shirt and we were all blinded by the red skin. And Coach was just like, are you kidding me, Haws? And really, it was probably my fault because we arranged for a little catamaran to go out. That was a blast, though, if you think about it. Okay, we could go forever.
I feel like you know more about Marty's life than Marty knows
No.
about his life.
No.
That was such a good description of everything. You went from his own life to all of his family members and even his wife.
I haven't even scratched the surface, but that's the beauty of this. This is just podcast number 1. We want you to get to know us. And so you have Mike and Marty and Maddy. And that was not by design that we had three M's. We thought about that name, but the title Blood, Sweat, and Sports Parenting just it rang true with us. There was no getting away from it. And so Maddy was a part of that. And Maddy, we knew needed to be a part of this team because she not only could show us how to use a computer and a microphone, but she too is one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen. And so Maddy at age 10 was, top 10 in California in tennis and could have done anything. And every soccer team she played on in her early years was 5 goals a game and nobody could stay with her because of her speed and her skill and her vision. And somewhere along that journey, I kind of became a part of her life and she fell in love with basketball and golf, my 2 passions. And she was an all-state performer in golf. She was also a CIF champion in basketball as a point guard and an all-state performer in basketball. And I wanted her to play golf because she was recruited by every team west of Mississippi to, have a full ride in golf. I wanted to go the Marty Haws route and not pay for college. But Maddy decided basketball was her love and walked on at BYU. And that's not because she didn't have other offers. She wanted to go to BYU because that's where her siblings were all going to college. Came onto the BYU program and said, Coach, we'll pay for school. Just give me a fair shot. If I can make this team, I want to play. I played college basketball for 3 years and on the BYU basketball team. So she's lived it and hasn't quite lived it.
I'm not yet a parent.
Yeah, I'm not even an
But
expecting parent.
Maybe.
Really?
Maybe during this podcast,
Oh.
we will have news. That would be exciting.
That would be cool for me
That
because
is the next step at least.
Breaking news.
that would be grandkid number 3 for me. Marty, you have
4.
Four.
And 1 on the way.
Oh, I didn't know the one on the way.
4th girl, 1 boy.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, Maddy will be instrumental to you to say, how do you
There you
raise
go.
a girl athlete?
I got you. I've done my fair share of coaching.
Maddie's married. She's recently married. She's a college graduate, and she
Well,
works.
recently, as in like 6 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
That's nothing.
Well, that's recent for us.
It feels like a long time for me.
Because Marty and I now in our mid-50s, I honestly can't believe how many times I say the phrase 30 years ago.
Yeah.
That hurts.
That's sad.
I can't say that one yet.
No,
At all.
no. And I know we're not the only ones to go through this little, advancing in age thing, but I honestly can't believe where the last 15 years went.
Yeah.
40 to
goes fast.
55. Like, what the heck?
That's a good message for everybody, right? It goes fast.
It does. It does. We were just Maddy.
Yeah. That's right.
Mid-20s and starting a family and getting ready to raise these little souls who we, might hope would be superstars, or at least. Anyway, I'm gonna let Marty tell you kind of how this whole idea came about, but maybe even before we get there, I think I'll let each of us kind of have an impromptu attempt at our mission statement, right? Because this podcast is not about raising athletes. It is giving knowledge and our resources and our learning, and through whom we talk to and interview. Like, we'll interview somebody who's successful in the world of sports or business or life, and we're going to ask them what worked for them as a child, how they were raised, and how they're implementing it in how they raise their own children. But I think the end goal is that we raise, well-adjusted children who are full of confidence and self-esteem and can win at the game of life. And whether or not that includes sports, right, I think is secondary to the winning at life, right? But then again, there's all these amazing lessons you learn through sports. Am I putting you guys on the spot to say?
I feel like you
I don't know.
just gave all
Yeah.
of our mission statements.
Well,
Because that is the underlining of all of what we're doing here. I'm not a parent, like I said, but I've been raised by parents, and I hope to be a parent one day. And the thing that I think we're trying to do here is just have the understanding that we're bringing everyone together as a community, and we're all kind of in the same boat. And there's so much learning that can be done, and so much that we can share with others, but also learn from others. And there's no right way to parent. Would that be fair to say? I don't think there's a right way to parent, because every child is different. And every person is different, right? I would assume.
No, well said. And let me jump in and just maybe add to that a little bit. But I do think when I look at this has been a long time coming. Mike and Maddy, thank you for being part of this. The reason this podcast exists is because I went looking for it, right? And it's something that I wanted to see. I thought it would be out there. There was a hole that needed to be filled, and that's been several years ago, right? And slowly but surely, I would give this idea to my kids, and TJ and his wife Lauren. They were instrumental in saying, you have to do this. And that's where, it's been a couple of years now, Mike, and you all can see why I chose Mike. It's like, you know what? He can do this in his sleep. And it really is something that I believe that many parents are out there trying to figure out how to navigate this road. It's a windy road, it's a bumpy road. And I think what Mike said earlier rings true with me and all of you is we've used this analogy for a long time, but you think of a sports bus and we're all on it. We all get on it when we're young and we're asked to get off of it at a certain time, right? And sometimes it's in the 7th grade, sometimes it's in the 12th grade. For those few that get to go on and continue on the road, it doesn't get less bumpy, but it is a fun, long journey. And I just believe that too many times, whether you get off the bus in the 7th grade or the 12th grade or in college, too many times it's a crash and burn at the end, right? And the hope and the goal and what, in my probably hundreds of conversations with other parents, what you're trying to do, I think, is you're just trying to have your son or daughter get to the end of whenever they're asked to get off the bus and look back and say, that was positive, and I learned these lessons, and it helps me in my next chapter in my life. And if we can do that, if we can give some perspective to that, I do believe that you can go through it and kind of deal with the things that come up, and in a way, be a little more prepared to say this comes with the territory, and we're prepared to be able to deal with it.
I mean, it's, I think, a byproduct of what parents will go through raising either athletes or children. This podcast could be instrumental in helping parents
Hopefully
allow their kids to make it.
I agree.
Like in some ways, you could say you're 3 for 3.
Well, and I think when you say make it, there are many parents out there that make it means, they're going to play in college or pro. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we say make it. When we talk about make it, if you're asked to get off it as a junior in high school, you want to be able to look back and say, I learned these lessons that helped me get to my next chapter, and I'm better off that I had to get off because it helped me get to my next chapter faster. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to be successful in life with. And so I think that's what we're trying to do here.
My best buddy in high school was an incredible athlete, like 6'5", could run like the wind. He was an all-state wide receiver. He was all-state baseball pitcher. He was a decent basketball player, like all-league, second team all-league. He went on to play Division I wide receiver in college. And at 6'5", was not fast enough to become a college wide receiver, and was thin and sinewy too much so that he couldn't put on 50 pounds and become a college tight end. And he didn't realize that till 1 year, a second year, and almost most of his third year. And then he threw up his hands. He said, you know what? I'm going after this other stuff. I'm going after a business career, master's in business. He's my age now because we were buddies in high school, but he's been ultra successful, multi-millionaire, because he got off the bus, engaged, and took the same principles he learned in terms of work ethic and discipline. And I compare that to, say, me, who I chased a basketball career for 9 years professionally, and then it wasn't necessarily crash and burn, but I'm telling you, for a year and a half, I wondered what the heck I was going to do. And I'm a college graduate, and I was a good student, and
So you can see with that information, what I hope is that parents out there listening to this or watching this can have a little bit of a paradigm shift and be able to say, okay, what does success look like? And really, we don't know. And I say this all the time to parents. We don't know what your child's ceiling is, right? But what we can do is we can work and help them get to this ceiling. And whatever that is, great. But for parents, if you can have a little bit of a paradigm shift and say, it doesn't have to end making all this money at the end of the road. Let's back up and have a little perspective and be able to say, if we can learn to be a better teammate, if we can learn to be on time, if we can learn to have team chemistry, if we can learn all of these things that help us in other areas of our life, then sports did its job. And if we don't, I think what we all see all too often is it's all or nothing. We're going for it. And the reality is that's not healthy, I don't think, right? And so
It's true.
I like the thought of all or nothing, because I feel like that's how I felt. Because like he said, I only played college for a couple years, and there came a moment in my life where I had to make the decision: am I going to continue, or am I going to follow a different career path and really do what I'm going to do the rest of my life? And for me, I grew up only wanting to do sports. That was my life, right? Like, he knows. That's all I wanted to do. I was playing tennis at a young age. I was in the Junior Olympics for fencing. I played basketball, and I
forgot about that.
Yeah, he forgot about that one on purpose.
Is fencing even a sport? I'm kidding.
Whatever. So anyways, my whole life was dedicated to sports. And when I made it to the college level, I was like, okay, like I made it, and now let's keep going. And so for me, when I had to make that decision of, yes, I'm going to stay, or no, I'm going to get off the bus right now, it was super, super hard for me. And it lasted a while for me to be okay with it. And I don't think I ever really got okay with it, because I'm still to this day playing basketball 3 times a week and trying to golf.
Pickleball tournaments.
Yeah, pickleball is the new thing for me.
State amateur championship in golf.
But that's okay for me. Like, I'm okay because I have been able to still...
Wait, I need to tell a story. Last summer, Maddy, who was an incredible golfer in high school, has not played hardly any golf for like 6 years. Correct?
Yeah.
Hasn't practiced, but says, Dad, will you come up to Utah and caddy for me? I want to play in the state am. So she goes through the stroke play the first day and qualifies for the final 32 match play, which takes place the next day. We go up to Oak Ridge Country Club in Farmington and get there at 7 in the morning. First match is at 8. Maddy's playing the high school state champion from the year before in round 1. That's her first match. And she's 2 up with 4 holes to go.
And BYU's #1 recruit.
Oh, and BYU's #1 recruit. Okay, Maddy hasn't touched a club really. And so I'm caddying for her. She's making putts, and we're just, 2 up with 4 to go. You should close that match. I think the girl makes a birdie on 15. Now she's 1 up with 3 to go. Maddy makes a bogey on 16. Now they're even with 2 to go. Maddy makes a bogey on 17. The other girl makes a par.
I feel like we don't need to finish this story.
Wait. So now we get to 18, and the girl, I think, made a birdie or something. Anyway, the girl wins 1 up. And we get in the car, and now I should have told you this ahead of time. Had Maddy won in the morning match, she would have played an afternoon match, right? To go on to the final 8. So now trimmed to 16, it would have been 2 matches a day as you wound down the week, Thursday through Saturday, till the championship. So we get in the car, and, this is Dad bursting with pride because she's played so well. She qualified for the final 32. She had this girl on the ropes, but, didn't close the deal, and this girl made a good putt on the last hole, whatever. So I decide to broach the subject a little bit. What the heck? Maddy, you had that girl, in a stranglehold. You kind of loosened the knot. What the heck? You let her off the hook. She's like, Dad, tonight I have a City League championship game. I couldn't even possibly fathom playing 18 more holes in the afternoon before tonight's City League championship basketball game. I'm like, what? What? Next time, get another caddy.
Yeah, not one of my finest moments, but we did win the championship game of basketball, which was great.
Of course you did.
Like I was saying, I think that what Marty spoke to was the all or nothing. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It just has to be what's right for you or your kid. And that looks different for each and every one of us. And that's why we're here, to approach those topics and to talk about it and to discuss it with some of the people that have made it all the way. It's water break time on the Blood, Sweat, and Sports Parenting Podcast. We will be right back, but first, just a reminder, you can become a pro parent member today. Join our membership at sportsparentingpodcast.com, where you will have full access and all sorts of benefits, including live Q&As with sports psychologists, therapists, mentors, and more. You can find our interviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Don't forget to stay connected on Instagram and follow Sports Parenting Podcast. Thanks for taking a short break with us. Now back to the action.
I'm going to segue to this, and I'm going to let Marty chime in because he's raised 3 kids who have quote-unquote made it. And I know for a fact they're all 3 different. One's a girl, two are boys. But even as both boys played for BYU, I think they're different in their construction, their mindset, how they approach things. And I'll just say this, having raised 10 children, still raising 2, all 10 are different. And that's the greatest challenge we have as parents, is how do you correctly push their buttons to drive them or push them without overwhelming them. Next, I think the greatest challenge as parents is that all children react to discipline differently and react to encouragement differently. And then they have their own motor. Some are self-motivated. You just turn them on and they'll go do what they're supposed to. And then the others you kind of have to lift. And others you have to softly push along and encourage. And then they all keep track of what's fair and what's not fair. Well, wait, you treated this one this way, and you treated this one had this as a bad time. And oh, well, yeah, he was a straight A student. I'd have to worry about it. That's not right. That's not fair. And of course, parenting doesn't come with a handbook, right?
No, that's exactly right. I look at great coaching, which is what we're trying to do as parents. Great coaching for me is a coach that can adjust to personnel and strengths of a player, right? And not expecting that every player comes in and they have a system. That might be old school when we grew up a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
These coaches today, they can go out and come up with a game plan to say, we're going to do this because this is what this player does really well and it helps elevate our team. Well, I think there is a parallel there with us as parents, right?
Yeah.
Kind of what you described. They come the way they come, and we can't just say, okay, this is what worked for this one. The better we are as parents, being able to say, this is how I push buttons for this kid compared to this is how I push buttons and get results for another one of my kids, right? And it's fascinating, it's fun, it keeps it interesting. They all come with their own ceiling, and we have to be able to say, what does success look like for each one of them? And in my own case, right, you've spoken about Tyler and TJ, and their ceilings were high, and it didn't come without, its own windy, bumpy road that we've talked about. But really, I look at my daughter, Gabby. She's a sophomore in college playing volleyball at a Division II school in Idaho, right? And she's not playing as much as she wants to play or thinks she should play. And in the current environment that we all live in, it's like, well, get in the transfer portal, get to a different school, do all these things. And I just think differently about that and have encouraged Gabby to, no, we're going to stay put, we're going to fight, you're going to show up every day and work hard, and we're going to gain some lessons out of this that are going to help us down the road. And for me and for us, we're not going to transfer. We're not going to, the grass is not always greener over somewhere else. And
that's true.
And we're going to get out of it what, others might look at and say, no, and every path is different. And, with Gabby, I might be the most proud of Gabby. My boys know she's my favorite kid, and right, and
He just admitted that.
But going and just fighting and waking up every day and just saying, I'm here to get an education. I'm going to practice. I think I should be playing more.
Yeah.
But okay, so what? We're just gonna fight.
Is she left-handed?
I think she eats left-handed, just like her dad.
You do, right?
Yeah, that's
You
right.
write and eat left-handed, right?
do
But you
everything
shot a
else.
basketball right-handed.
I know, yeah.
Did you hit a baseball left-handed? Is my
No,
question.
right-handed.
Oh, so you hit right and threw right.
Yeah. I kick a ball left-footed.
So do I.
Yeah.
I kick a ball left-footed too.
I do too. Oh,
Yeah.
funny.
That'd be a dangerous. Would be dangerous on the soccer field.
You're getting an idea, at least, and that's the goal of this podcast, is to what we want to explore, what we want to teach and learn. We don't think we know everything. We don't think we're perfect in our delivery or in our knowledge, but at least in our hearts, they're in the right place. In other words, we want to do this for the right reasons, and it really was Marty's idea. And he just called me out of the blue one day and says, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "Is there a podcast like that?" And he goes, "No, I can't find one." And he goes, "What do you think about it?" And we just started formulating ideas. So
One of the things that I love about this is now we have 2 years of preparation under our belt to make this podcast even better. Don't you guys think it's interesting that every conversation that we are in with people that could either be on the show or have kids coming up, that there's no resistance. Everybody likes it. Everybody thinks that there's something great that can come from this, right?
Because it's valuable.
And we look at it, and we've had many strategic conversations about, hey, who should we have on? And Maddy, I want you to talk about who we've secured to come on, because this first season is going to be a real powerhouse. But that's not, let's talk more about our long-term vision of what we think is valuable for everybody that's listening or watching.
Yeah, definitely. Before we get into that, I just want to say that I was not the first member of this team at all. These guys had done so much preparation before I even came on. And really what happened was it was just a conversation like, hey, I have this idea. And I fell in love with it from the very beginning. It was so brilliant, and it's just something that needed to be heard by so many different people. And that's how I came onto this. So I was like, I will do whatever you want, and I will build whatever you need, and I will even show you how to delete your tabs. And and so that's how I came onto it, and it just has been so fun working with these guys. They're brilliant. I have a producer background, so I am not used to being on camera or the one speaking at all. I'm usually the one saying, hey, say this or do this. And there's a reason for that, so bear with me as we do this first season. But it has been amazing, and I've loved every second of it. So I just want to go into what you can expect. We have an amazing guest lineup, and I'll actually let Mike kind of talk about that a little bit more. But before that, we really want this to be engaging for all of you. We have amazing guests, but you are so essential to what we are trying to do, because we need the questions. We need to know what you want to know. So with that being said, we have a website out. It's called sportsparentingpodcast.com. We want you to be featured on our podcast. If you have any questions for the three of us, or you'd like to share what we're going to call a sports parenting win or loss every week, and yes, it's going to be so fun hearing from you guys, your parenting wins and losses. I know from our experience, I had a brother who I'm sure he was really excited when he started playing sports, but he was the one chasing the butterflies on the field. And that might have been a little bit tough. So we want to hear those things, and maybe that's a win for you. I don't know. Maybe it's a loss. It doesn't really matter. It's what you kind of think of that. What's really cool is we are going to have our parental guidance suggested, which is the quote, the inspiration that comes from our guests.
it's our
week.
tagline.
It's our tagline. And so we're super excited to start this. And if you go on our website, at the top, it says to be featured on an upcoming episode. And if you click on that, it will take you to a page where you can ask any questions if you'd like to share, or even ask a question to one of our upcoming guests. That is where you put all that information in. And once you submit it, then we will be able to answer that. So we are looking forward to it. So with that being said, Mike, do you want to talk about our guest lineup for this season?
Yeah, Marty talked about no resistance. Like from parents we talk about, or anybody in business we talk about, hey, what are you doing now that the Jazz basketball season is over? I said, well, I'm starting this podcast. Marty Haas came up with this idea. We're doing it on blood, sweat, and sports parenting. The reaction, that's awesome. There needs to be that one out there. So yes, no resistance. But take it a step farther. I've reached out to colleagues, friends. Marty has as well. And we think we've assembled like a really cool first year's list. You know, from NFL MVP Steve Young to Major League Baseball MVP Dale Murphy to NBA World Champion Danny Ainge to a college champion, Ed Pinckney, raised in the Bronx, New York with a family of 9 girls. Del Curry and Michael Thompson, fathers of famous Clay and Steph, the Splash Brothers. And the list can go on and on into the world of golf. You have Johnny Miller, you have Peter Jacobson, you have Jim Nantz, who, in my opinion, is the greatest sportscaster in the history of the profession, right? He comes on the Masters and says, hello, friends. And we all just sit down and relax. And he's the greatest guy in the world, raising 3 kids of his own and raised by a beloved father who's since passed on. But he'll tell you how he was raised as a high school basketball player in North Carolina who ended up going to Houston as a college golfer, but didn't make the college travel team. Like only the top 6 actually travel and play. His teammates are Steve Elkington and Blaine McAllister and Fred Couples. So Jim doesn't crack that lineup. And immediately in the middle of a college golf career decides to become a broadcaster and actually rehearses recording a green jacket ceremony with Fred Couples, his roommate, as college students. He will tell you that story and tell you of a wonderful mother and father who raised him to be great and maybe didn't go as far as he wanted to in sports, but look where he is today. And we can go on and on. Steve Kerr, world champion coach. I saw a graphic the other day. He's a really good friend of mine and a contemporary in the league when we played, but goes from broadcasting to coaching and now 3-time world champion and winning his coach in playoff history.
Amazing.
And he's a great communicator, just a great deliverer of the message and doesn't look at the here and now of a team or a player, but creates an expectation of where they can go.
And Mike, one of the things that shouldn't be lost in this is all of these people are interviewed every day, pretty much, right?
Yes.
And what you and I have talked about is this is going to be a different interview than they've ever had, right? And so that's pretty cool. That's part of their willingness to come on. And yeah, when we say no resistance, they're like, that's pretty cool.
That's what you're going to do.
I would like to come on and be part of that. And so we all get to learn. And as Maddy said earlier, we're not coming to it with all the answers. We're going to learn as we go here, which is pretty cool too. And then it transitions into others. Maybe talk a little bit about what we envision on season 2, 3, and 4 on from there.
Well, I can't go ahead anymore without telling you just a little snippet of one story, okay? I'm a broadcaster in the world of basketball, so I know the history of the NBA. I specifically know a lot about the art of shooting the basketball because I loved it. I loved that part of it. And I was a tall guy. And back when we played, tall guys didn't necessarily shoot from outside, and I wanted to be different. And so I look at someone like Steph Curry, okay, who's, in my opinion, changed the game of basketball. Oh, yeah. And not just the game that we watch at the highest level, but he's changed the college game. Marty can attest to the fact with the little young teams we coach, he's changed the game at those levels.
Sure, no doubt.
We're coaching 5th graders and 6th graders and 7th graders who are pulling up from 3.
And we love it.
We're all in. Like we spend the first half hour of our hour and a half practices shooting. And, after we shoot 18-footers, we're like, okay, go back and shoot 3s. And go back and shoot NBA 3s. And my rule is kind of, if you can't make 7 out of 10 from a certain distance, I don't want you taking them in the games. But if you can prove to me in practice you can do it in the game. I digress back to Steph. And Steph, in my opinion, is the greatest shooter of all time. And I think there's 4 guys, in my opinion. There are going to be many guys who get to the 2,000 barrier of 2,000 NBA makes. You got about 9 guys right now. But there are going to be about 5 guys, at least, in my opinion, who will get to the 3,000 barrier, which Steph just eclipsed as he passed Reggie Miller a couple years back, and this year he passed Ray Allen to be the only guy at 3,000. Steph is 34, by the way, and guards who are thin and can shoot well tend to age well in the NBA because it's a skill that does not go away, whereas a bigger guard whose skill set might be post play or physical play, they're not going to age as well. Maybe a Russell Westbrook would be an example of that, who's 6'4" and can't shoot from outside, and we all knew that before, but now he's understanding that. And nothing against Russell because he's done things in 3 years that nobody ever did, right?
I think he has the best motor ever.
Oh!
Right? I mean,
Most explosive.
And 3 years averaged a triple-double, right? You got to go back to Oscar Robertson. But let me just tell you one thing about Steph. Steph's dad is a really good friend of mine. His name is Del Curry. Okay, Del is 6'7" and played at Virginia Tech. Wasn't heavily recruited by the Dukes and North Carolinas. Went to Virginia Tech, just kept working and developed this very quick release in an era when we didn't shoot a lot of threes. If you think about it, Del plays 16 years and ends up with 1,700 threes, which is a ton for his era, right? Only a handful of guys make more than he does in that time frame that he plays. But he's 6'7", long arms. He marries his sweetheart Sonia, who played volleyball at Virginia Tech, and they have 3 kids. And Steph is the oldest, and Steph ends up being 6'3". Yeah. And nothing against being 6'3", but when Steph is 14 and a half years old, Del and Sonia pull him out of AAU ball, and Steph could already shoot the lights out, but it was a shot that started down here. You still see resemblances of it, and took a while to get there, but he could make an incredible percentage. They, and I find this so fascinating, pulled their boy out of AAU ball for a year and said, no more of that. You're not going to be 6'7". Marty talks about a ceiling and recognizing where they could go. You're not going to be 6'7" like I was and play small forward and big, tall shooting guard. You're going to be a point guard if you want to make it to the highest level, or if you even want to make it to college, right? Because there was no guarantee he was making it then. Del pulled him out, and for a year, Marty can relate to this from all his 5 a.m. trips to a church gym with his boys, pulled him out and said, we're not going to reconstruct your shot, but we are going to change it from the perspective that you have to shoot it as fast as you can. And I'm going to feed you balls till my fingers bleed, and you're going to catch and get rid of it as fast as you can. And you're going to develop the same accuracy from 3 that you have now, but you got to do it in a 1-second release instead of a deliberate release. And you got to get stronger from your core and your lower body, your glutes, your quads, so that it builds from there and you can just let it go. And that guy pulled out of basketball for a year, still doesn't get to 6'3" till college, not recruited, ends up at Davidson on a whim, has that magical senior season, right? Picked in the NBA, and still 2 point guards are drafted before him. Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn. Ricky Rubio's had a decent career, never an all-star. Johnny Flynn, 4 years and out. And here's Steph, the 7th pick, changing basketball history because of, let's say, 2 parents who saw the light and could adjust on the fly.
Such a good metaphor for our show, right?
Yeah.
Unconventional thinking, parents that are willing to say, you know what, the basketball world would say we have to do it this way, and somebody's willing to say, no, I see it a little bit differently, and their instincts took over and took a different path that helped him get to another level, right? And that's going to come up again and again. And to Maddy's point earlier, when we're having people be part of our show, we're going to hear stories like that.
Oh yeah.
I think there's going to be cool things. Listen to what we did, and there's going to be different levels of success, but there's going to be wins in there that will help others, and we all get to experience that together. That's pretty cool.
And you don't have to hear me tell that story. Like, I just gave you bits. You'll hear Dell tell that story.
Yeah,
right?
we'd rather hear it from him.
Exactly how it happened, not my paraphrasing.
Well, and it's cool because you're telling that story, but everything in sports is related to life. So what you're talking about is maybe a bad habit, and in that case, it wasn't even necessarily a bad habit, but making something better so that you can achieve a different level or hit a higher ceiling. And so for many of us, it is going to be breaking a bad habit, right? I know my husband, he had the 2-hand shot and he was so good at it. And so for him, it was so hard to want to give that up, because why would you give it up when you're going to make bucket after bucket, right?
Plus he's a little stubborn.
Plus he's a little stubborn. He's a lot stubborn. But it takes the willingness to change, and sometimes it takes someone else's input.
I say it's a paradigm shift. Somebody
Sure.
that you just is willing to say, have you thought about this? And it's like, no, I haven't thought about that. And unconventional, right? It might go
Absolutely.
against the grain a little bit, but we're all going to learn those things together. I think there's real value in that.
So we are so excited for this upcoming season. And like both of these guys have mentioned, we have not had any pushback. And with that being said, we have also reached out to therapists and nutritionists and
call.
sports psychologists and people like that this season to join us in our mission to bring all of this to everyone and to talk about the sports parenting world. And like the athletes that we've reached out to, those guys and girls have been so on board. And with that, you get access to these therapists and nutritionists and sports psychologists and all of these amazing contributors that we're going to have on our season. They're going to be at your disposal.
We want ideas. We want your feedback on our website. Tell us who you'd like to hear from. There's a distinct possibility we could have them on one of our shows. And I got more stories about Marty. When I say he was the fastest, he really was. And he could literally fly off one leg. I'm telling you, he goes 6'2" at his best, but could fly. Like borderline dunk from the foul line fly. Think Zach LaVine.
Oh.
Think Julius Irving. Right? He could fly.
Okay. Well,
But we got some fun intramural stories too when we would play football.
good time.
That's all coming. Hey, the Blood, Sweat, and Sports Parenting Podcast and the world of sports parenting, right? Parental guidance is suggested.
Let's go.
So my only question is, are you ready?
You've been listening to Blood, Sweat, and Sports Parenting, brought to you by Built Bar.